in order to get to the subject matter, I'm going to start with what a visitor left the other day, a couple comments, and I'm going to address those because he addressed the consciousness issue that we raised last time, consciousness and spirituality, okay? Whether the universe is conscious, whether the universe, whether you can talk about spirituality at all in physics, and whether it is this spirit rolling around in the universe that's watching over us, the modern version of God, essentially, Is there such a thing out there? And this fellow says the following. With that, I'll lead to the subject matter, which is Einstein, right? But let's start there. And here you see this fellow says, consciousness isn't produced by brains. There are living presences that have no brains. Yes, I guess he proved that much. Consciousness is in what we call space. It's in space, okay? And I guess he's visualizing something like this, okay? Yeah, we have just consciousness and no brain. Just consciousness floating out there in space. Is that what consciousness is? Some kind of smoke, some kind of fog, some kind of mist that's out there floating and thinking on its own, like separate from the body. When you die, the consciousness goes to heaven, that kind of thing. And why did I bring this up as an introduction? Well, because of this, we have to differentiate what belongs to, physics and what belongs to philosophy, okay? And that's where people get confused and they start bringing stuff that doesn't belong in physics from philosophy, right? And there you have philosophy, that deals with something called consciousness, whatever that is. We don't care because we don't deal with philosophy here. We deal with physics. And the brain belongs to physics. That's atoms, molecules, cells, hard stuff, So that belongs to physics. That's material that belongs to physics. On the other hand, consciousness, it's a verb. We don't bring verbs into physics. We start with objects, then move them. But these things are already moving. This thing called consciousness, mind, spirit, whatever you want to call it, thought, idea. These are concepts, and we don't bring them into physics. Especially, we don't turn them into a physical object like this fellow did and say, look, there's a consciousness out there in space. That's the dwelling point of consciousness. But that's how a lot of people think today. They actually believe that, that consciousness is a thing that's floating out there. That's the way they think of it. And so they can talk about, consciousness leaving the body, separate from the body, because when the body dies, consciousness survives, goes to heaven, to hell, wherever, That's the issue. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is when people bring concepts such as consciousness, verbs, and treat them as objects in physics. And here's a rundown of that so that you can see where I'm coming from with all this. These are the fundamental unresolved paradoxes of mathematical so-called physics, right? We separate physics from philosophy, the two branches of science. Physics deals with causes and mechanisms. Philosophy deals with reasons and purposes, right? And so physics deals with determinism. They're a deterministic process because atoms, molecules, they have no possibility of, inert matter has no possibility of, on its own, of moving against gravity, against the, what we say, the path of least resistance, okay? On the other hand, philosophy deals with indeterminism, or known as also free will. Free will has to do with living things, whereas determinism is more appropriate for objects, right? So we have to separate physics from philosophy, objects from concepts. Determinism applies to atoms, molecules, planets, stars, those, objects. And philosophy, when you talk about free will and whether there's determinism or not, now people are getting into these other things like mind, consciousness, conscience, thoughts, ideas, etc. One deals with phenomena and the other one deals with behavior. So we separate these two with a clear-cut knife, slice right through them and do not ever mix them. Okay, so keep your philosophy to yourself. Okay? And here's a synthesis of that. It was made by a fellow known as Jesus Christ a long time ago. And here it is. He said the following. He says, "Render therefore unto physics the objects which are of physics, and unto philosophy the concepts that are of philosophy." And of course, the establishment hung them, and that's what they might do to me for bringing these things up, okay? But yeah, we have a problem with bringing concepts into physics, especially turning them into physical objects and saying consciousness exists as a physical body out there in space. No go, okay? Okay, so why do I bring this up? Because there's a lot of that involved in Einstein's life. The fact that all the so-called physicists, mathematical physicists of the 20th century, they had a problem distinguishing philosophy from physics. And especially when they got into quantum, they started talking about indeterminism and determinism and free will and things of that nature. And again, atoms don't have free will, but a lot of people started talking about that subject, bringing that subject into atoms and molecules and so on. So now we have a problem because these people are bringing stuff that doesn't belong in physics in there. And among them was good old Einstein, who looked at some of that and did not quite zero in on the problem. Okay, so as we will see today, a lot of people criticized him in those days because he had problems with bringing this indeterminism, especially into quantum mechanics. And he said, God does not play dice, doesn't roll dice. Okay, so you'll see in a minute how that played out. Okay, so let's start first with a quick bio for bgaede here. Best known for developing relativity, right? His mass energy equivalence formula was great. He received the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics. What did he receive it for? He did not receive it for anything he is famous for. He's famous for, his Nobel was for the photoelectric effect. Okay, and what he did, he took Planck's quantum, okay, and applied it to the photoelectric effect. In a nutshell, that's what he did. He did not receive for special relativity. He did not receive for general relativity, which today he's famous for. Okay, for his equations, field equations of 1916. And his name is associated with or equated with genius or intelligence. You are an Einstein, they say. Well, I'm not sure anybody would like to be called an Einstein once they realize what little Einstein contributed to science, let alone physics. Okay, so this is from the American Museum of Natural History, and they did a little piece on them, and I'm going to be analyzing essentially their work, their writing. It says Einstein was driven by a vision. His goal was to describe all physical phenomena, known as the grand unified theory, right? He never succeeded, but Einstein's dream did not die with him and survives even to this day. Everybody is following Einstein and trying to do this grand unified theory or the theory of everything, or one of those two, right? And he laid the foundations allegedly for all the work that all these so-called physicists are doing today. Okay, so he's treated very highly in the establishment. Okay, and so anyone who writes a paper has to pay his due respects to Einstein, not badmouth him under any circumstance, or he doesn't get his paper published. I know. I know about that a little bit. I can tell you from my experience, okay? Okay, but Einstein had a relatively sad life, at least from my point of view, the way when I analyze his life, it's a little pitiful life. And so here, let me summarize it here. Einstein, as far as I'm concerned, he was somewhat of a tragic figure, right? His first daughter, Earl, died. They found out that he had a daughter in 1903, I think it was. They found out about it in 1986, looking through some of his old letters and so on. They found that he had a daughter that died, okay? And he married this lady, Mileva, had a son, I think his youngest son, Edward Tete, who was institutionalized. He was schizophrenic. And so he was institutionalized for most of his life, and I guess Einstein had to live with that. And as I understand it, Edward hated his father, and even though he wrote letters to him, he always badmouthed Einstein. I guess for abandoning him. I don't really know the details, but that's what it appears to be. His first wife, Mileva, they separated in 1914. They had to wait 5 years according to the laws of those days before they could officially divorce. They divorced 5 years later, 1919. And there's an argument whether she contributed to his mathematics. There's evidence on both sides that she did and she didn't. Everybody reaches their own conclusion. I think there's not enough evidence either way. Okay, but it is significant that Einstein gave his 1921 Nobel Prize to her for her to deposit in a bank and live off of the interest. And with that interest, maintained two surviving children, the two boys, and one more, which was this Edward Tete. Okay, well, Einstein married his first cousin. You know, his aunt had a daughter named Elsa, and he married her. They were both Einstein. Einstein married Einstein. Okay, she had a different name because she was also divorced she was from a different previous marriage. And but she died around the time that he was writing a lot of the stuff, 1936 and thereabouts. And so this comes out of one of his letters, from Einstein's letters. The strenuous intellectual work in looking at God's nature are the reconciling, fortifying, yet relentlessly strict angels that shall lead me through all of life's troubles. He was having a rough time, okay, and he was trying to focus on his work to escape his personal problems. So he did not have a great life, I guess. I don't know if you could call him a happy man, maybe to some degree. You know, everybody has problems in their lives. You know, so I don't know to what degree these things really influenced his work. But what I do know for a fact is that, while he was at Princeton, the last years of his life, his colleagues did not think very highly of him. His close buddies all thought of him as a crackpot. And here it is. This is what he wrote. And there you have the dates. Okay, I become an obstinate heretic in the eyes of my colleagues, and I'm generally regarded as a sort of petrified object, rendered blind and deaf by the years. He was put in a corner in a desk, and nobody paid any attention to him. They ignored him. All he had was this big name, sleeping on his laurels, so to speak, right? And then he says, all these 50 years of conscious brooding have brought me no closer to the answer to the question, what are like quanta? He says, I consider it quite possible that physics cannot be based on the field concept. Remember he wrote the field equations on continuous structures. In that case, nothing remains of my entire castle in the air gravitational theory included, and of the rest of modern physics. Okay, so Einstein became an atheist in the religion he founded, and I guess that was part of the reason that he was ignored by his colleagues who were shunned, put aside. They rejected him. They thought of him as a crackpot later on, or saying, well, the old man, he lost it. Okay, that's, I guess, the way they saw it. And what we should do then, because one of the things that Einstein objected to throughout his life, this I think was very clear, is quantum mechanics. He did not like the indeterminacy, the free willingness, the fact that it's all these particles, they had a mind of their own and could do whatever they want, appear wherever they want. They would appear or turn into objects or into atoms only upon touch or upon seeing them and so on. He didn't like all that. And so he rejected, especially the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, the one championed by Bohr and Heisenberg. Okay, and so this is what we should apply to him. If we follow Juanito Baez's Crackpot Index, 10 points for each claim that quantum mechanics is fundamentally misguided. Yeah, we should apply these 10 points against Einstein because he did not agree with quantum mechanics. And then the other thing is, you should take another 10 points for arguing that while the current well-established theory predicts phenomena correctly, it doesn't explain why, meaning mechanism, right? They occur, or fails to provide what? A mechanism. Yeah, and Einstein wanted to understand a mechanism, and he thought that was part of physics, but apparently Juanito, whatever monastery he studied at, didn't believe that that was part of physics. And yeah, so, we should apply the same standards that mathematicians apply to dissidents out there. We should apply it to Einstein. But see, they want to make an exception of Einstein, and they hide a lot of the stuff that is negative about good old Einstein. There's one fellow here who wrote an article saying that Einstein was not really against quantum mechanics. And this is essentially what he says. He says, few of Albert Einstein's sayings have been as widely quoted as his remark that God does not play dice with the universe. People have naturally taken this quip as proof that he was dogmatically opposed to quantum mechanics, which views randomness as a built-in feature of the physical world. Okay, in other words, quantum mechanics is a statistical theory, really description. It's not even a theory, it's a description. And that's not a theory. But what it is random. They say, look, you cannot predict things in quantum mechanics because it's so random, it's so unpredictable. And here you have one fellow says, others have shown that Einstein accepted that quantum mechanics was indeterministic. That he accepted that. Yeah, well, I mean, he conceded because everybody conceded. Not that he liked it, but he said, yeah, the way quantum stands today, it's indeterministic. In fact, nothing has changed since the days of roaring 20s. Nothing has changed in quantum mechanics. What he did not accept was that this indeterminism was fundamental to nature. Yeah, which is the physical interpretation. And that part, that's what they brushed aside, saying, well, that's not part of physics. That's philosophy. That's the answer you get today, or that we'll never understand how Father Universe runs his shop. They've got all these answers to it. And what this fellow produces is some evidence, I guess, proof here. Einstein championed the notion of quanta, the packets of energies. In other words, he provides proof of why Einstein did not really reject quantum mechanics. And so these are his arguments, saying Einstein championed packets of energy, the quanta, for which he essentially got his Nobel, right? Light's peculiar ability to act as both particle and wave, the wave-particle duality, right? That's central to quantum mechanics. And that when atoms emit photons, the timing and direction of emission are random, okay? But in Einstein, he concedes, Einstein was definitely anti-Copenhagen interpretation. The issue here is that Copenhagen interpretation is quantum mechanics. That is the interpretation. Now that's trying to be superseded by the multiverse. People like the multiverse that, you have all these universes out there, and there is really no randomness. It's that you fall into one universe instead of going through the other universe. But all the possibilities are there. So they invented all this garbage, all this nonsense, this rationality, to try to explain what they cannot explain. So they go further, deeper into the rabbit hole to try to explain simple things, right? Why? Because they cannot explain them. And so since Einstein objected to a lot of that stuff, they say, well, he did not really object to it. He realized that quantum was okay, but he just said that he had a problem relating that to how the universe actually runs, right? Which is really the physics part, right? And, it's a bunch of baloney, that argument, because here you can see these two gentlemen. They were in 1926 at the Solvay conference, the fifth one, right? And they had a debate, essentially. And today, Bohr is regarded as being the winner of that debate, the guy who came on top. Why? Because essentially he showed Einstein, or proved to Einstein, or proved to all his colleagues at least, that quantum was correct and needed no finer adjustment. It was a complete theory. And Einstein was saying, well, there's something missing there because it can't be that the universe is completely random, okay, or that the universe works in a random way. Okay, so that's essentially the introduction. You can see the big deal was this randomness. And again, a lot of that had to be related to this indeterministic world, which they identified with free will. And they're saying it's like the particle has free will because it can come in at its own discretion into being or appear here, not appear there, be at two places at once. You know, that nonsense Einstein rejected. He did not accept that part. And but that is a standard feature of quantum mechanics, so we have to concede that Einstein did not agree with quantum mechanics. He wrote a paper on that, known as EPR, which has to do with the entanglement and experiment, EPR experiment, that this particle affects that one far away from a distance, action at a distance without a mediator. And he had a problem with that as well. And mathematical physics has been plagued for the last 400 years with action at a distance. Especially the force of pull. You cannot pull without a mediator, and they're doing it without a mediator. They're saying this particle affects that particle both gravitationally and through entanglement, quantum mechanical wise, without a mediator. And that's called witchcraft, magic, black magic, voodoo, voodoo science.